The other day, my friend asked me to help him turn a JSON object to CSV. So I decided to make a video since other people may also be interested in the exact same solution. Now my friend needed to use JavaScript and HTML in order to do this. And we'll use JavaScript on the front end, and then we'll show you how to do this in just using node.js. So here's a JSON object, is in the data.json file. So let's go ahead and go over to our index.html file, and we'll go ahead and use a shortcut to add our HTML to our HTML page, or index.html. Now we need to add two script tags. The first one will be our data. So we'll do source equals, and this will be actually easier if we do data.js. So we'll create another JavaScript file, and we'll copy the data.json over to our data.js. Then we'll add another script tag for our source code, and we'll add the app.js here. Now it's important that the app.js goes after the data.js. If we put the app.js before the data.js, we won't be able to access the data. So we need to make sure that we have the code app.js after the data.js. Now let's go ahead and create another JavaScript file, and we'll call it data.js. Then we'll go over to the JSON file, we'll copy the contents here, and we'll declare a new variable, and we'll do const data equals, and we'll paste our JSON object. Now we can close that out. Now the next thing we need to do is go over to our app.js. Now we want to go ahead and add all of our data inside of an array. Our CSV is, which is nothing more than a comma separated value. It'll be a string. So we want to put all of our contents inside of this array, so that way we'll be able to better manipulate the data. All right, so we declared our array. Now we need to go ahead and have our header for our CSV. We can do this by doing object.keys. Now, since our data.js, since all of the property names or key values are exactly the same, we can actually just do object.keys, and then we can use the first object in that array, in our JSON array. Again, all the property names are the same, and so we just look at the very first one, and we'll do object.keys in order to just get the property names or the key values. Now let's just do a console.log, so that way we know our data is coming across correctly. Now let's go ahead and go over to Firefox. Okay, so now I'm in Firefox, and I'm just going to look at our console. You can see that the headers is inside of our array. Now let's go back to our app.js and continue writing that code. So we can loop over our data with a for each. Now the very first parameter that we want to add to our for each is just the element. Now the element will be this JSON object. So every time it loops over, it'll get a different JSON object. Now we're going to push inside this array, not the object, but the values of that object. And we can do that just by doing object.values. And so using the global object, we want the values of this JSON object. Let's go ahead and do a console.log, so that way we know that everything is coming across the way we want it. Let's go ahead and go back over to Firefox. So now I'm in Firefox. I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page. You can see the very first console log is our headers. And then you can see that all of our values are next. So it's an array of arrays. So this is exactly what we want. Let's go ahead and go back to our code. We'll remove that console log and the other console log as well. The next thing we want to do is take this array and make it into a string. We do this by doing the array.join. Now we'll do a for \r and which is a character return, and \n, which is a new line. We do this because it's an array of arrays, and now that we're turning it into a string, what we want to do now is to make sure that each of those arrays are in a different line. Let's just do a console.log so that way we know that everything is coming across as we want. We'll also do a console.log on the type of, so that way we know that this is coming across as a string. Excuse me, not a string, but here we go. Yeah, so we want to make sure that this new array is coming across as a string of values. Let's go back over to Firefox. You can see that this is exactly what we want. The type of shows that it's coming across as a string, and we now have all of our data here. Let's go ahead and go back over to our code. One thing that we failed to do is push our header to our array. So we'll do array.push, and then we'll do header. Now let's go back over to Firefox and refresh the page. Okay, that's more like it. Now we have our headers and then all of the values after that. Let's go back over to our code. Now we're almost done. We can get rid of those console logs. And now what we need to do is download this into a CSV. How can we go about doing this? Well, we can create a anchor tag dynamically just using JavaScript. So we'll do let ele equals document.getElement by ID, and we'll create an anchor tag. And then we'll just do an anchor tag. And then we'll need to do ele.href. And then this will allow us to actually download the data. Data text /CSV. Then we'll do charsat equals UTF-8 -8. Then we'll do a comma. Then we'll do a encode URI. And this will do a character escape for us. And we'll do that variable that has all of our data. Then we'll do ele.target, because we don't want it to come up with a new page. We want to just download it directly on that same page. So we'll do _blank, which will make sure that it doesn't come open on another page. Then we'll do ele.download, which is allow us to name the file itself. And then we'll just do output.csv. And then we'll do ele.click. Now this will automatically click the anchor tag for us. And that's essentially all the code that we need in order to take this JSON data that we have and export it to a CSV. Now let's go ahead and go back over to Firefox. So now we're back over in Firefox. We're going to go ahead and refresh this page. Can't access href ele is null. Let's see, we must have did something wrong here. Oh, we need to do a plus instead of a comma. Let's go back over to Firefox. Let's refresh the page. No. Line number 14. Oh, sorry. It's not get element by ID. It's create element. There we go. Because we're creating an element dynamically. That element doesn't exist on our index.html. Let's go back over to Firefox. Let's refresh the page. Now we see our output.csv. Let's go ahead and open it up. And you can see that now our data is in a CSV format. And we're able to open it using Microsoft Excel. So this is how we can do it, just using JavaScript and using the DOM. But how can we do it without using the DOM? Well, let's go ahead and go back over to our app.js, and we'll no longer need Firefox at this point. So now, looking at this, what code can we keep and what code do we just need to get rid of? Well, we no longer need this code right here that manipulates the DOM, so we can just get rid of that. Now, we can go back to the line number 1, and we can do const fs. Fs just stands for the file system. We'll do require fs. Okay, we actually don't need this data.js anymore. So let's go ahead and get rid of it. Okay, all of our data is inside of our data.json. We also don't need to index.html anymore, so we can get rid of that as well. Okay, so we're just going to use our app.js and data.json. We declared a new variable called fs, which just stands for file system. And let's move this code over into an array. Or rather, let's move this code over to a function. We'll do function export to CSV, and we'll just do the parameter data with in all caps, because it's going to utilize all the code that we already have. We'll paste that code inside of our function. Now, all we need to do is write the code to get the data from our JSON object. We can do this by doing try, and we'll just do a catch, and we'll do ERR, and we'll just do a console.log on ERR. Perfect. Now here, we can do a const data equals fs, which is file system, read file sync. So the read file sync will read in our data, and we'll just do data.json. And then we need to do UTF-8. Cool. Now, let's just do a console.log, just so that way we know we have the data and we're reading it inside. We'll go here, we'll type in node and app.js. Perfect. We can see our data comes across perfectly. Let's go ahead and do it clear. But one thing to make note of is that that actually is a string and not a JSON object. All of our code here relies on the data that we're sending it to be a JSON object. We know this is a string because if we do a type of, and we rerun the code, it says that it's a string. So that means that whatever our file reads in the data, it reads it in as a string. So we need to turn this into a JSON object. We can do that by doing json.parse, and that will take the data that is read in as a string and turn it into a JSON object. Now let's just go ahead and do a console.log on that. You can see that now it's an object. Just to double check, we can just do a type of. Perfect. Says this is an object. Let's get rid of the type of. Now let's pass it in to our function. Perfect. Now we can just do a console.log here, and everything should work exactly the way we want it. It should take in the data and turn it into a comma separated value. Let's go ahead and just refresh, or rather just rerun the program, and you can see that our code works exactly the same. The only thing we need to do now is export this string data into a CSV file. So we can do that by just doing a write file, and we can just do output.csv. We'll pass in our data, and it wants a callback function, so we'll give it a callback function. We'll use an arrow function here, and we'll just do if err. So if it errors out, we're just going to do a console.log, and we'll do a return. Okay, everything should work exactly the way we should want it. We'll clear our terminal, we'll rerun it. You can see that the output.js is here, and now we have our comma separated value without using a DOM. Hopefully this video was educational, or maybe even hopefully it'll help you out with a project. I'll see you in the next video.